Battlefield 1 broke my heart. And I mean that literally. My heart is not capable of working anymore. All the emotions that I could previously experience are completely gone. Like love, anger, and hope for a good Battlefield game. All gone. All that's left is a bitter feeling of disappointment. And look, I'm not here to bash the game and tell you how much of a fucking disappointment it is. What I'm here to do is to examine it, and explain to you why it's such a fucking disappointment. And since I'm the doctor here, let me tell you exactly what is wrong with Battlefield 1. But where do you even begin with a game like this? Well, I suppose with the single player, since it's the very first thing that you even experience with booting up Battlefield 1. But don't worry, we won't end there. I'll be going over the single player of Battlefield 1, multiplayer, and some of the bullshit that went along with it. And I will compare it to actually a good game. A game that takes advantage of its setting, that doesn't waste it like Jared Leto's condoms by filming Suicide Squad. And while in the long run Battlefield 1 disappoints me so much, I have to give it some credit. It's quite risky to go for a World War I theme, and it's one of the most beautiful games out there. The real shame comes from Battlefield 1 just not taking advantage of its theme. It feels completely wasted. So, as an astrologist, I wanted to examine it deeply. So strap in, kids. We're in for a bumpy ride. Before I even begin, let me tell you my history with Battlefield franchise. I love it. I really do. I started playing Battlefield with 1942 and I almost never stopped. I played every single iteration of the series, even loving and hating Battlefield 3 and 4. So my expectations for Battlefield 1 were really mixed. How are you supposed to get hyped for something that has such a record of bad optimization and technical issues? However, Battlefield 1 had a flawless launch, at least for me. Game was optimized really well and I experienced no crashes. Plus, it definitely helped that I loved the beta. It was genuinely great. I loved the new map, Sinai Desert, and since it was just a beta, I couldn't wait to explore what else the game can offer. More diverse weapons, more factions, and maybe more authentic gameplay. Oh, no, no, what have you done? What have you done? Well, I suppose single player can save the game? Nope! What a fucking wasted opportunity. If you decide to tackle World War I, there are some responsibilities that go along with that. You're about to examine a real war that happened over 100 years ago. Millions of people died in this war and it wasn't viewed so black and white just like WW2 is viewed today. There was no bad guy, no evil overlord whose ego and economic situation made him to take over an entire continent and eradicate a couple of million people in pursuit of his clean Aryan race. World War I was full of political intrigue, fallen monarchs, and a breakthrough in waging war. It was genuinely an interesting time in our history, well worthy of exploring and introducing this to a generation of fucking idiots that didn't knew Titanic was real. Yes, those people exist. I got to be honest, the very first mission, Storm of Steel, had me pumped. I loved it. And as a professional veteran, I can tell you those dead Germans looked very, very realistic. What? It had emotion even though it was scripted as fuck. I mean, there wasn't a single step that wasn't predetermined by the developers. But that doesn't mean it was bad. In fact, far from it. I thought the pace was great for those 15 minutes it took to beat it. It was focused on Harlem Hellfighters, even though there were like 5 of them in the entire war, but you know, whatever. We'll get into that later. But the visuals were beautiful, the animations, voice acting, music, sound design, all of it just jumps out of the screen at you and fucks your eyeballs and ear holes so hard until your brain is replaced with stale but still great tasting Austro-Hungarian semen. What I mean is, it looks and sounds really good. I like it. But most importantly, it shows you that every life is completely expendable. Every single soldier, while being human, is still just a piece of a great machine designed to fight in this war. And when one dies, another one replaces him immediately. There might even be a moment or two where you feel sorry for shooting your enemies, because the game presents them as human beings and not just another brown targets popularized by Call of Duty. It blends your typical war porn with some real emotion, and it actually shows you how these battles might have been fought. It feels like war. And yes, it feels glorified, and yes, in some places it seems overly pornographic with war imagery, but the emotion it provides feels raw and real. It's difficult to hate the game after this intro. But boy oh boy, are we just getting started. I just want you to remember this one particular line.
But behind every gun sight is a human being.
It's a powerful, powerful line that is supposed to set the tone for the rest of the campaign. Unfortunately, well, you'll see. Oh my god, all this depression, this intro had me heartbroken. Where's my puppy? Oh, there he is. Look at him. His name is Link. I named him Link after that cisgender white male from the Legend of Zelda series. Yeah, white male. What have I done? What have I done? Where are my Bill Cosby sleeping pills? There they are, I think. Yes, come on. Now I'll just grab these and put them right over here. There you go, there you go, yes. Eat up, little doggy. Eat up. Yes, yes, yes. Eat. Eat, you little fuck. The whole campaign is separated into 6 short stories. Each will take you around 30 minutes to an hour to complete. The first one I played after the intro was the pilot mission. And while the story is way too short for you to give a shit about any of the characters, this pretty much applies to all the stories, I kind of enjoyed it. You know, the character of Blackburn was likable enough, and the story, while completely fucking absurd, had a nice twist at the very end, which justified the absurdity. Basically, you're told that everything you just experienced came from a point of a lying, cheating character that lied his ass off to sell himself to you as this likable fiend with a heart of gold. But in fact, he was just a lying, thieving jackass. And everything that he previously claimed he wasn't. Fabrication of this story by Blackburn justifies the fight on top of the airship, jumping from it and surviving the fall. And while it doesn't excuse some idiocy in the gameplay, for instance, why the fuck are planes clearing out aid trucks? The rest is fine. Honestly, there is not much else to add here. It's fine. Even good in some places. Essentially, it's an A-OK short story saved by a pretty good and smart storytelling towards the end. The hopes are still high, right? Nope! The next one I played was the Matteo mission, and oh my god! I can't take a single fucking thing from this mission seriously. Not a single fucking thing. Okay, basically, this story is told from a position of an elderly man telling his daughter a story from WW1, how his brother died. It's a sad story, or well, it's supposed to be. But it's the most fucking absurd, machoistic power fantasy that I've ever played. How any of this is meant to be heartbreaking, or thought-provoking, or sad is completely fucking beyond me. Until now, you've noticed I haven't talked at all about historical accuracy. And that's because I'm a pediatrician, not a historian. And another reason is, it wouldn't make any fucking sense. I mean, just look at this.
War for Italy. The Arditi.
Oh, I'm sorry, instead of Battlefield 1, I accidentally booted up Todd Howard's first game. The Terminator?! Okay, so this is supposed to be about RDT, right? Fine. There were a bunch of volunteers, Italians' bravest volunteers, and could be considered some real historical badasses. Allow me to quote an internet cyclopedia. RDT was the name given to the elite assault troops of Royal Italian Army founded in 1917. The word RDT literally means daring or audacious. Their duty was to prepare the way for a broad infantry advance by attacking and infiltrating the enemy defenses. They were intended for attempting to end the deadlock of trench warfare. The audacity their military role entailed helped to create a myth surrounding their endeavors. Italian wartime propaganda played its role in fashioning such a legend by circulating images of the Arditi holding grenades in their hands and daggers between their teeth while assaulting enemy lines. Moreover, the publication of a number of memoirs and accounts immediately following the end of the conflict helped to blur the distinction between history and myth about the Arditi's wartime undertakings. That sounds pretty fucking cool, right? And you know what? I got to ask just this one question, right? What the actual fucking fuck is this? I'm sorry, what was that line?
But behind every gun sight is a human being. But behind every gun sight is a human being. But behind every gun sight is a human being.
You see the conflict here? I mean, seriously, the theme is supposed to be extremely sad. It's about a loss of a brother, and I know how that feels. I ate my brother in a womb. But it's just handled so fucking poorly. There's this one thing called tone. And I don't mean that fucking OP Titan from Titanfall 2. I'm talking about how you introduce your game and show the player what kind of game is it going to be. Is it going to be a dark, depressing, and somewhat authentic portrayal of war? Or is it going to be just a pure power fantasy? You have to choose one and stick with that tone. And for the most part, I'd recommend most developers to fucking do that. With movies, it's very similar. They don't just change the tone of the movie in the middle of the picture. Unless they're Koreans. What's funnier than a police officer? A Korean police officer. They got the murderer and they don't even know. Look! Oh, they're so stupid. Police officers are so fucking stupid. There's the murderer. What? After all this? This is how it's going to end? Take my throat medicine! What have we learned so far? Well, we've learned that RDT definitely didn't wear any armor and didn't kill tens of people single-handedly. And do you know what? Hold on a second. 213. I killed 213 people in that fucking mission. Yes, I counted them. And you know what my first impressions of this mission were? I thought the twist is going to be that Matteo is still alive and well, and that the main protagonist is just old, or maybe got shot in the head and made all this up. Maybe, you know, he just made up this story about him wearing this armor because he's old and maybe senile. Would it have been cheap? Maybe. But at least it would explain the fucking absurdity happening on screen. There are moments when even Infinity Ward's Call of Duty games didn't go this fucking far. I thought it might end like this. Maybe towards the end, the daughter would be like, "Dad, I think you might want to see someone." And, you know, Matteo would come in and talk to his brother, and for a while they would chat, and the old man would start to cry to see his brother again. Then Matteo would leave along with his daughter and say something like, "How many times did he tell you the story this week?" And she'd be like, "This is the first time so far." You know, because he might be old and senile and going crazy from the horrors he's seen in war. I mean, true story, my grandfather fought in WW1, and from what I've heard, he never wanted to speak about it. He would wake up in the middle of the night sweating because almost every day he dreamt about his experience. So maybe something like Old Man Senile Brain might have explained what was happening on screen. But no, it was taken absolutely fucking seriously, which frankly makes it a bit insulting. And not only to an intelligence of the consumer, if you have a double-digit IQ, and yes, by that I mean also 10, but also the fucking victims of World War I. And you know what? I wouldn't be bringing this up if the game wouldn't be so fucking insisting of embracing these people. These are our stories, don't forget us, and so on and so on. And this is how you want these fictional people to be remembered? Like a cold-blooded sociopathic murderers? Or anything would have been better than what is presented on screen. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. Listen to me, Tesoro. There was this one time when I was in the Arditi and we were fighting in the Alps, and I had this armor and I started shooting Germans with my machine gun, and I killed like 200 of them, and it was a very, 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 very interesting time to be alive in. And you know, that morning we had a really good pizza, so now I was in a really good mood, and that hardened my skin even more, and my machine gun was just firing constantly, and just everyone was dying around me. And you know, there was this one time when I got just a little bit on fire, but it was okay because I had my armor. And then we were shooting these fucking planes from the fucking sky with this fucking AA gun that all of a sudden is shooting like the gun from Battlefield 4, and we killed like million of them, and I was just me alone. And then the fucking plane crashed on me, and it was very difficult for me because it finally broke my armor. But then it wasn't such a big deal because then I took my submachine gun and then just murdered the rest. And you know, then I found Matteo, and it was so sad because he was dead, you know, because I don't know, you know, the fucking mountain fell on him. The mountain fell. It just feels wrong. And the reviews for Battlefield 1 just got me completely puzzled, especially when you see them talking about how emotional these stories are supposed to be. I mean, what were these people shoving up their rectum? I recommend tampons with vodka. Because honestly, I have no fucking clue what they're talking about. If they found this to be really sad and emotional, have they even seen Hope? It's a Korean movie on Netflix, and that movie is really sad.
Oh my god. This is so sad. So sad. Where are my tissues?
Okay. Oh god, ignore the cucumber. Which one is my bodily fluid tissue? Yeah, this one should be clean. Oh, for fuck's sake, god fucking damn it. There we go. Okay. Next. Lawrence of Arabia. It's dull, boring, and half-assed. Next. I mean, honestly, what else do you want me to say about this story? Honestly, it's pretty boring. It tells you nothing about T.E. Lawrence nor the group that he fought with. It's just get your manuscript so you can communicate with the train, then lure the train into a trap. Nothing feels like it has consequences. Nothing in this entire story. Oh, so we captured the bad guy and he told us the thing that we already knew, so hooray, tiny victory, we got the bad guy, and then oh no, the bad guy escaped. What are we gonna do now? Well, he already told the train that he's gonna bomb the Lawrence's camp, but we killed the bad guy, but Lawrence already knew, so he escaped, and it's like, why? It just feels pointless and forced in. Just because T.E. Lawrence was in the First World War, now we have to tell a story about him. Okay, but tell a fucking story about him. This told us nothing about T.E. Lawrence. And I could go on and on about how interesting he was, but what's the point? And I mean it, what's the point? That would be putting more energy into it than DICE did. Next. Oh, the Aussie story. Oh man, this one. Okay, so basically they want you to give a shit about this kid while they introduce him like a fucking drooling idiot.
Been lied about his age to get past conscription.
And next time you see him, you are teaching him how to shoot in the middle of a fucking war zone? What? The last time we see him, at the very end of this story, he's a hardened war veteran that is protective of his squad mates and experienced in combat. What? When did all this happen? When did all this happen? Isn't it supposed to take place in a single day? It's just so unbelievable. There's this thing that they have going on with the flare gun. He fires it twice, once at the beginning to get the kid next to him. Then at the end of the story, the kid shoots the flare gun so that he can join them. I don't know. Frankly, it's just completely forgettable. Even with this amazing voice acting. There is just very little here that makes it memorable nor particularly enjoyable to play. It's just bland as flour. And I know a lot about flour. I'm a psychiatrist after all. Next. The tank mission. Well, honestly, this one, along with the plane story, might be my favorite. I mean, it's not saying that much, but, you know, still. And the main reason why I thought that this one was actually okay was because it embraced the time period and the tank. Even though sometimes the tank feels like it's just meant to move the plot forward, at least in some moments, story here can actually evoke some emotions. Tanks were kinda useless at the time and not reliable at all, and even the game acknowledges that fact. You know, this likable tank crew has a mission to get to some French town, and that's pretty much the story. They start getting picked off one by one, either by technical deficiencies of the tank or by the enemy. You also get to play as a fucking pigeon. Hell yeah! World War I, right? What? I mean, I get what they're trying to do here, but... What? Pigeon? Okay. Okay, let me set this up for you. Our bunch of tank crew members keep pushing deeper into enemy territory, and all of a sudden they found themselves surrounded by enemy forces. I don't really get how that happened, since a second earlier we were just surrounded by allies, but, you know, whatever. So they released this pigeon to call artillery on their position. But this entire plot point doesn't really matter in the long run, since nothing happens to the tank crew. All the enemies are dead and our tank men are just fine. So you get to play as a pigeon for about 40 seconds, and then artillery is called, and all the enemies die and you're just fine. I mean, okay, I guess. It was a bit anticlimactic. Anyway, it keeps going, you keep running around like a fucking idiot, kill a ton of enemies, then it's back to the tank for the very last battle, then the commander dies, you and your gunner leave, and that's pretty much it. There is not much to the story, like I said before, but the atmosphere is actually pretty thematic and authentic. Overall, I definitely would say that this one is not too bad. Unfortunately, it might end up being a little bit forgettable. So, let me just say, as a professional doctor, there are issues here. And for the most part, the game suffers from something called tutorial syndrome. The entire campaign feels like it's setting you up for the multiplayer, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but capping points feel awkward in a single player game.
Hold here and clear the area. Sure our boys have time to move on.
Plus, most of the campaign just feels empty and extremely linear. It's just a giant set piece after another giant set piece and watching a lot of very good cutscenes with some great voice acting and visuals. But I really have to ask one single question. How the fuck is this a World War I game? And I mean that honestly. How? Why does it need to be a World War I game? That theme seems to be completely wasted here. If you've been watching the video, you might have seen how fast I was running, how quick the game is, and an alarming lack of trenches. Oh my god, it just dawned on me. It plays more like Battlefront than Battlefield. What? What is a question that I've been asking myself through my entire playthrough. What and why? And look, I get it, it's kinda risky to release a World War I game, and you know, since it's not really a proven setting that works, but if you're gonna go with that team, you might as well do something with it. The gameplay doesn't represent anything from World War I. There are very little trenches, there is very little tension, and just the frontline battle seems to be constant. And the worst thing was, at least for me, almost every time that I played infantry, I felt like one man's army. It almost never feels like you're part of a bigger battle with hundreds of other soldiers, your brothers in arms fighting alongside you. And why? Even Call of Duty was able to achieve this feeling in 2003 for fuck's sake. And to say that it feels like a World War II game in World War I's clothing isn't quite accurate for me. It does feel like something. It feels like World War I theme was forced to a game where it just doesn't belong. Now imagine that this puppy is Battlefield 1, okay? He is Battlefield 1. He works. He's a formula that works. He poops, he bites, as you can see, and he eats my tissues, my dirty tissues. So he is Battlefield 1, okay? Now, let's imagine that this cucumber right here is World War I theme, okay? Now, allow me to get a bit of Vaseline. There we go. And what you do is you apply the Vaseline on a cucumber. You gotta be very thorough about it. Very, very thorough. Now, you take the cucumber, the World War I theme, you find Battlefield, and you shove it up its fucking ass! Almost every single aspect of the gameplay doesn't scream World War I, except maybe flying and tank combat. Well, tank combat is a little iffy, but still, it feels a little authentic. And look, I get it. Battlefield 1 is not trying to be an accurate representation of World War I get it. But to completely disregard Russians and French seems a little, like I said before, insulting. And you know what? Why not include German campaign? Austro-Hungarians. This isn't World War II, there are no fucking Nazis. There are just soldiers fighting for their countries and unfortunately dying for them. So, how do you fix it? Well, I wouldn't call myself a professional psychologist if I didn't have some suggestions, right? First of all, reduce the number of stories. Make them 3 or maybe even 2. Focus on battles that actually really mattered in World War I, like Verdun, First Battle of Marne or Brusilov Offensive. Have 3 campaigns, all 3 of them focused on a single massive battle, and tell stories that way. You would be able to include multiple stories. You can have a story of a soldier who volunteered to fight on his own because his brother died in the war. And then at the same time have another story of a grizzled pilot veteran who's attempting to do most damage to the enemy front lines as he can. Maybe even give us some choices, who we can save and who will live. We could get emotionally attached to some character, only to choose to sacrifice him later on to save the others. It could be really epic. And most importantly, if you decide to tackle World War I theme, use it for something else than aesthetics. And while they are sure as shit gorgeous in Battlefield 1, they feel wasted on a shallow and dull campaign. Maybe the mission structure can be something like this. What I'm about to show you is highly sophisticated technology, so just please try to understand, okay? Let's take a battle for Verdun. And let's take the scenario from the mission through Mud and Blood. The tank is stranded. There is infantry and there is plane mission. And you'd be able to pick between one or the other, or maybe even the tank, okay? But of course, we need to keep the stakes high, right? So, the enemy forces are constantly attacking the tank. Therefore, you need to choose. Do you want to protect the tank as an infantry? Do you want to rush in and just try to do it on your own? Or do you want to do the plane mission first and do reconnaissance? But maybe just risk the fact of you being shot down. And maybe you'd even be able to just switch between all three of them on the fly, just like you can in GTA 5. I mean, why not? And of course the tank needs to be surrounded, so there are enemies everywhere, and your only mission is to save them. And maybe those giant, beautiful, gorgeous cutscenes that Battlefield 1 has can give you some exposition about these characters so that you actually give a shit. And you can learn about all of these characters while at the same time presenting you these battles that actually happened. And you know what? Fuck it. Maybe even go for real life characters. And you can trust me with these graphs. You can definitely trust me because I am and always have been a gynecologist. And you know what's worst? They already did a very similar thing in the fucking prologue! And for the love of God, stop it with the automatic rifles. This is World War I after all, not World War II. And look, I get it, they're there for gameplay variety reasons, which I suppose it's fine. But it is super distracting to have soldiers constantly running around with automatic weapons in World War I game. Just keep it thematic, and you can change the gameplay variety through mission variety. But most importantly, pick a tone and stick with it. Stop telling us this.
But behind every gun sight is a human being.
And then making us do this. Oh yes, multiplayer, the meat and bones of any Battlefield game. Well, how is it here? I guess it's better than the single player. But it just feels so fucking chaotic. It's so fast, there are moments when I'm having Quake flashbacks. And I'm not really sure that was the intention. Your soldier runs fast as a Doom Marine, and overall the battlefield just ends up feeling like a massive mosh pit. I really miss the commander feature here. It might have added so much, especially with the emphasis on working together and having squads since Battlefield 2. And that game did the whole feeling of you being on a battlefield so shockingly well. I'm surprised most of the Battlefield games didn't follow up on it. For me, the best thing about Battlefield has always been the feeling of worthlessness. Something my father taught me really well. What I mean by that is that you as an individual were always just a part of a giant army. You were a regular grunt fighting in this war. And yes, it was arcadey, and yes, it was more fun rather than realistic, but it had some structure. Commanders were giving orders, resupplying their troops and throwing down artillery. Squad leaders were executing those commands, and they were constantly trying to stay alive to provide a spawn beacon for the rest of the squad. Each squad was supposed to be composed from variety of roles because each mattered. And since Battlefield Bad Company, I suppose Bad Company 2 for PC, we now only have 4 classes, which, to be completely honest, I'm fine with this change. I honestly don't mind it at all. It gives classes a lot of variety. Well, not in Battlefield 1, but in theory. Most of the people in Battlefield 1's multiplayer are playing Scout. Why? Well, there might be some of that sniper fantasy thing going on, but in my honest opinion, it's because they have the best weapons, and those weapons are actually somehow thematic to the time period. And they are the only class that has access to bolt-action rifles in a World War I game. What? So there is Scout, which is your sniper spotter class, Assault, SMG and a tank killing class, Support, the annoying gadgets and a shit MLG class, and a Medic, the reviving and no one is playing this class. A really big issue that I have with Battlefield 1 is that their weapons just feel so similar. And by that I mean that most of the MLGs that Support has to offer almost feel identical to shoot, just like Medic's auto rifles. I mean, sure, they might not sound the same, but overall they feel, well, like I said, similar. Essentially, at the end of the day, you're just gonna pick a weapon that has higher damage numbers and bigger rate of fire, and that is a shame, because there is very little in terms of mechanics to offer here. Ironically enough, Scout and Assault loadouts have the most variation in weaponry. Scouts have sniper rifles, and they all feel very different to shoot and to handle. And the same thing goes for Assault. But here, you know, the big difference is that they have access to shotguns and SMGs, which, I mean, obviously they don't feel the same. But that makes a huge difference in playstyle. But the biggest issue, the cardinal sin, the what the actual fuck issue, for me, is the mosh pit mentality. None of these classes need to work together. Most of the frontline matches, you'll have a shit ton of scouts, a lot of assaults, a couple of supports and 2 medics, and you can still win the game. Since it's way more about the weapons than the classes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But what ends up happening is that everybody is just running around like a headless chicken, shooting the first thing that happens to be in their line of sight, using very little tactics or brains to accomplish the task. Plus the fucking grenade spam definitely doesn't help. Grenades are flying constantly in Battlefield 1. I wouldn't be surprised if a quarter of my deaths were caused by grenade blasts, which is just fucking beautiful, isn't it? And you'd think the DICE have learned something from Battlefront, but apparently not. Just go back and play Battlefield 4 and you'll see what I'm talking about. And while it's not a perfect example, the formula there still works. There is some kind of order in all that chaos. In Battlefield 1, it's just chaos. And unfortunately, most of the deaths will end up being really frustrating because of it. My point is that these games are most fun when they have some sense of order. At least for me. Some sense of structure driving players forward. Not just a bunch of black Germans running around with automatic rifles. Game modes are pretty much the same. You still have your conquest, domination and so on. 2 new additions that I actually ended up liking a lot were operations and frontlines. They were very thematic, and honestly frontlines, if it wouldn't be behind a fucking paywall, is a really freaking good game mode. But there are not nearly enough maps to keep them feeling constantly fresh. Maybe if you pay for a season pass. Oh, I'm sorry, premium. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get to that later. The main reason why I enjoy these modes is because, again, they feel thematic. Somewhat. At least it feels like there is some kind of a battle line that one or the other side constantly keep on pushing back and forth. And these modes can produce some really awesome and awe-inspiring moments. Watching an airship crash will never get old. I mean, visually, it looks amazing. So you see, it's not all bad. I'm not just complaining here. I have some good things to say about the game. But I think that ever since probably Battlefield 3, this series had some serious identity issues. It doesn't quite know how arcade or how serious it wants to be. Battlefield 3 overall as a package felt half-baked, and Battlefield 4 was still in a fucking freezer when they released it. But both games later on became quite compelling as Battlefield titles. I'm not quite sure if the same thing will happen with Battlefield 1. Especially since E3 just happened and they announced that, you know, another DLC will come in September. I mean, September? Really? Okay. But this identity crisis is at its peak here. It's like a werewolf teenager that doesn't want to take the full responsibility of imminent adulthood. It just doesn't know what it wants to be. Does it want to be fast-paced, fun, super casual shooter? Or does it want to be super serious, brown, gritty, and a dirty portrayal of World War I? It seems to be stuck between those two extremes, unable to pick a side. But dude, I mean, you're growing older. It's time to choose. Or at least lean towards one side or the other. But on the more positive note, the music... Oh my god, the music. Even in single player... I mean, it pretty much carries over to multiplayer, is so fucking good. It gets your blood boiling, and I just love it, especially in those just pitch-perfect moments when it starts playing. It's amazing. Even by itself, it's a phenomenal soundtrack that I genuinely recommend. But, I mean, this is DICE we're talking about. Sound and music is kinda their thing. Speaking of, the sound design is absolutely top-notch. Weapons sound amazingly well. The ambience is amazing. Being under fire almost never felt so good. I know how strange that sounds, but, you know, overall the sound is just so fucking good. There is no other way to put it. It is absolutely brilliant, absolutely phenomenal. So, how do you fix all this? Don't worry, I'm a professional. Trust me. I got your mats, bitch. First, take the theme, and you don't just shove it in. Kindly insert it in. You can't just shove it in, shove it up its ass. You might damage something. But once it's there, base your entire game around that theme. Focus multiplayer gameplay around the time period. For instance, limit the number of classes people can pick. Having 15 snipers on your team is just fucking stupid, just like having 10 people running around with machine guns. Embrace the time period. No one is asking you to go full on realistic, but limit the fucking grenades for the love of God. I personally would just get rid of the behemoths. They are a cool idea, but for me they serve more like a glorified death streak from Call of Duty. They reward a team that is doing poorly. Not sure what the idea behind them is. If they were supposed to help the losing team, then I guess they could be considered a success. But for the most part, especially in Conquest, they just become an annoyance. Something that the game can totally live without. Also in Operations, I can't shake the feeling that behemoths serve the purpose of balancing the poor map design. Especially on maps like Monte Grappa. Well, it was difficult for us to balance the defenders. You know, let's just give the attackers a giant fucking airship. That should do it, right? Also, weapon variants feel a bit pointless and only emphasize the lack of weapons in Battlefield 1. Essentially, they are just attachments already attached to weapons and then sold to you as brand new guns. So why not just allow us to customize the weapons? Obviously limit the number of attachments so that weapons won't become overpowered as fuck. But we're back where we were before. Make maps designed specifically for these modes. Bad Company 2 did it so well. Why not take cues from that game? Basically every single map felt like it was designed for Rush in mind. And that made them so much fun to play. These maps in Bad Company 2 were genuinely awesome. But here each map has just objectives redistributed and redesigned borders according to the game mode. It feels cheap. And look, I'm not here to underestimate DICE or tell you that they are lazy, because I don't believe that. Well, maybe I do a little bit. But they are talented developers, and they know how to create some amazing looking maps and create some awesome dynamic set pieces. But I think it's time for Battlefield's map design to step up. Battlefield 4 had way better maps. But from what I've seen at E3 so far, that Battlefront 2 footage, oh man, I'm just not sure.
Play here.
Oh, good. Finally, somebody playing some support.
Support people matter too.
They do.
You know,
They
you gotta
do.
give them some love.
We're the linchpin of the team, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Now, what is his 2 exactly? His 2 is the healing
His
ability?
2 ability is that, yeah, exactly. It's that healing ability. It gives you a little bit of buff.
We're also seeing some great
some
dogfighting
dogfighting.
here between the clones and the separatists. This is certainly what a lot of folks love in Star Wars, and just really in any game that DICE makes, right? They just always do a good job with the air combat. He's really trying to track him down. This
They just always do a good job with the air combat.
Still looks like a fucking clusterfuck to me. Hope this won't become a trend with DICE games. And for my very last prescription, wait for the last part of this video. I mean, you've made it this far, you might as well get it over with, right? Okay, let's get into the bullshit. Battlefield Premium is bullshit. Why? Well, let me explain. Already I have issues finding players on the new DLC. Why is that? Well, because the game isn't as popular as it was at its release. Some people just got disappointed and didn't want to purchase the DLC, and voila, you have empty lobbies. Waiting for people to join, separating a community is never a good thing. I just don't understand this need to DLC hoard the living shit out of Battlefield when you already have a working microtransaction system. It just seems like an overkill and a real test of patience for the consumer. And don't even get me started on the loot boxes. I hate that system so much. Where are the times when you just purchased a game for its full retail price and slowly unlocked all the content that it has to offer? Now, I'm not a fan of that system either, but at the same time I understand that these days developers have this fucking need to have this good old carrot on a stick trick to keep people playing for a long time. You know what? Back in the day, the game just needed to be good. But I digress. Basically, at the end of every match, you might, and I emphasize might, get a loot box. And from that loot box, you might get the skin for a weapon that you actually use or a vehicle that you like. It's just annoying and random. And if there is something that I really hate, it's a complete RNG in terms of unlockables. Now for the big one. The race controversy. Oh my god. Even I have mentioned it. I have talked about black Germans before. Oh my god. A cisgender white male has talked about black people. I don't care. I honestly don't. If you have a game where a support class is running around with a fucking Lewis gun and Russians are not part of WW1, you might as well have black Austro-Hungarians. Is it distracting? Sure. But it's the least of my worries. Does it cater to the PC culture? Probably. But like I said before, there are worse things about Battlefield 1 than black Germans. To me, what's strange is that even though Harlem Hellfighters are on the cover of the game, and they narrate the entire campaign, the game tells you nothing about them, nor tells you any of the history about Harlem Hellfighters, which just seems strange and, well, forced. Because they do nothing with them. It feels just like, oh look, we acknowledge that black people exist. And you're like, okay, so are you gonna do something about it? And DICE is like, nope. And look, I'm not racist. Never have been, never will be. I only hate Koreans, okay? And that's because they make movies that give me fucking goosebumps. But the biggest bullshit is, unfortunately, the gameplay. It's just way too arcadey and way too reminiscent of Battlefront, which definitely isn't the feeling that I wanna get while playing a Battlefield game. Battlefront was a very sloppy title from DICE. It felt incredibly rushed with a shallow gameplay. Battlefield 1 is unfortunately so similar, with a little more variety in terms of classes and weapons, but like I mentioned before, there is very little cooperation going on here. Everyone is just doing his own thing. It's white as a puddle, a gorgeous unicorn piss puddle, and deep as a, well, a puddle. But I mean, it's like a bigger puddle. Not like a small one, not like a Call of Duty puddle, it's like bigger. I mean, you get it, why am I explaining this shit? Basically, you have to give gameplay some structure. Not just run around like a fucking idiot. Let me give you an example. This is a good game. A really good one. Despite its dated graphic, wonky movement system, and honestly dreadful fucking voice acting. It just released on Steam and I can't get enough of it. I'm a big fan of Red Orchestra series, so this was a no-brainer for me to get. And how is it? Well, actually, really fucking good. And I should know something about Vietnam being good. My granddad was there and he fucking loved it. Many issues that I've had with Battlefield 1 are completely absent here. And that's not saying it's a perfect game, it definitely is not, especially right now with the alarming amount of maps is quite concerning for the initial purchase. However, the system here makes fucking sense. Thank you, Jesus. And what do I mean by that? Well, allow me to demonstrate. It's asymmetrical. And what does that big word mean? Well, it means that each side plays differently. Vietnamese build tunnels and hide inside them or use them as spawn points, while Americans, through the sheer power of democracy, can spawn on their squad leaders. And they have the most commonly used tactic of spreading democracy: napalm. They also have helicopters that can be used either for combat or to transfer soldiers to flank enemies from the rear. How do Vietnamese counter this? Actually quite easily. Their weapons really pack a punch, not to mention the traps, and while a bit buggy right now, they can throw down traps to slow the enemy. Traps are commonly used in choke points to slow down the progress of imminent freedom. Each class makes sense. Riflemen are your bread and butter for both factions. Machine gunners throw down suppressing fire and demolish enemies, while engineers can use flamethrowers or shotguns. Each team can only have 2 snipers, yes! Weapon feels heavy and difficult to fire. Switching your fire mode actually makes sense here. You have to decide if you want to spray at a close range or take pot shots from a distance. Every round feels like a grueling fight for every single inch of a jungle, town or a rice field.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
Unless you're not getting stomped. Movement is slow and monotonous, while feeling somewhat agile and like a human being, not like a human fucking tank. And all of this incentivizes players to communicate with each other. Actually using the voice chat to call for artillery marks, calling out flanks and warning teammates where the enemy might be. It's a really cool feeling to finally play a game that rewards teamwork. And not only does it reward the teamwork, it actually forces you to play as a team. You get points for everything. You get them for a kill, assist, capping a point, marking an artillery position for your commander, getting fucking the ass by the Vietnamese fucking traps. Speaking of, each team has their own squad leaders and commanders. What does this mean? Well, allow me to demonstrate with this highly scientific graph. Okay, so you have your commanders, okay? Commander per each team, okay? So they're like your daddy. And then you have your squad leaders, which are like your big brothers. Now, squad leaders can use their binoculars, those are binoculars, to mark artillery targets so that commander, your daddy, can go in and send artillery on those positions, okay? Now, infantry, it's like your sister, and they are working with the squad leaders, under the squad leader. Commanders can give orders to squad leaders what to do, and squad leaders can give orders to infantry. Now, infantry, they have these things called radio men, which are kind of like tampons, and radio men can follow commanders everywhere around the map so that the commander doesn't have to use the static radio points, okay? You see what I mean? It all makes sense. They need to be working together to function together. So you have these squad leaders, you have your infantry, and you have your daddies, and all of that creates a giant, gorgeous penis. And you can trust me with penises, because I'm gay. I'm urologist, okay? 100% certified urologist. See what I mean when I said Battlefield 1 is a clusterfuck and how to properly do a squad-based game? Now, am I saying that Battlefield should become a tactical shooter? Absolutely not. But these systems work. And what's most surprising is that Battlefield used them in the past. And they, surprise, worked. Obviously, you can't be dropping with one bullet in a Battlefield game, but they can take some inspiration from these games. Honestly, Rising Storm 2 is just really, really, really good. But why, you're asking yourself? Why would you involve Rising Storm 2 here? Wasn't this supposed to be a Battlefield video? Well, for one simple reason. It respects its elders. Oh yes, it does. And what do I mean by that? Well, everything from the menu screen, to gameplay, to soundtrack, all the way to customizing your soldier screams Vietnam. Especially the gameplay. It's using its theme and running with it. You don't like it? Shame. It's uncompromising with its theme, and it's better for it. Because it's focused. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I only hope that Battlefield can take some of its glory back. Red Orchestra series has a history of providing you with really immersive experiences. But so did Battlefield. And it's such a shame to see it all go away, and what we're left with is just this giant explosion-filled war porn. And that is not to say that there isn't stupid shit in Rising Storm 2. I mean, of course there is. You've got people shooting helicopters down from impossible distances with RPGs. You've got stupid ragdolls flying all over the place and some really fucking cheap deaths. But the biggest difference for me between Rising Storm 2 and Battlefield 1 is how it treats its source material, or the theme that it's based on. Rising Storm really embraces the era. Really embraces the theme, and I know I've said that word like a million fucking times by now. But Battlefield just takes the aesthetics, and that's about it. Every single aspect of Rising Storm feels like it's designed around Vietnam, and that's why I say it respects its elders. It's not glorifying war, it's not glorifying their deeds or what they've done in that time. It's just simulating what it might have been like. But it's such a shame because Battlefield used to do this back in the day. Back in Battlefield 2 and even to an extent in Bad Company 2. It's just so sad to see it go away. Because like I said, I genuinely like the series. I genuinely like Battlefield. In conclusion, I don't hate Battlefield 1. I really don't. It's a fun game that you can switch your brain off and play it for a little while. Just don't expect anything else, which is a shame, because honestly it could have been so much more. And like I said, it's not a bad game, I don't hate it. There is a lot to like. Like I said, the graphics are absolutely beautiful, the attention to detail is stunning and amazing. Sound design is absolutely incredible. But it just feels wasted on a really, really, really shallow shooter. It's just dull. And right now, it feels uninspired. It just feels so strange to see a lesser-known studio like Anti-Matter Games can actually make a better Battlefield game than DICE. But that's just a theory. Wait. No, that's not right. Well, basically, what I wanted to say is respect your elders, kids. Because with respect comes a great response. What? What am I talking about? Time to check back on my puppy. Round 2, you little fuck. I've been feeding him Bill Cosby sleeping pills for about 2 weeks now. He should be dead. So now What? What is this little fucker? Did he fucking multiply? What is this? What am I supposed to do now? I'm so confused. Oh my god. You know what? I might just do it myself!